Hello! This is a brief introduction to Picross and how to play, because there's a good chunk of people who are interested but they're also a bit scared by Picross. This video doesn't strictly apply for this Miku version of the game, but Picross as a whole. I do want to say though, Picross is not at all hard to learn. It's pretty approachable for a lot of people and it can be great fun when you get the hang of it. I'm going to try and make it as short and concise as I can, but there's going to be timestamps in the description and comments below if you feel like skipping some parts. With that said, let's look at the basics so we're all on track with how the game works. Picross is a true and false kind of puzzle game. You've got to colour in the squares that make up the picture and either cross out or ignore the squares which don't. There's also a tool which allows you to highlight squares to help you visualize the row or column, but you can ignore it if you want. What you might have noticed along the columns and rows is that there are a bunch of numbers, but what do the numbers actually mean? I think it's easiest to show this with examples, so let's take a look at this simple row with a single number. This 7 shows us that there's a single block which is 7 squares long, hidden in this row somewhere. Pretty straightforward, right? Let's look at another example, but this time with more than a single number. For this column, we have a 4, a 2, and a 1 here. This means we have 3 blocks of these sizes respectively in that order, somewhere in this column. But the important thing to keep in mind is that these blocks are never connected and will always have gaps between each other. What you might have noticed is that in both of these examples, the blocks could be placed in a few different positions. Because of this, we don't know for sure of all the squares that are correct or incorrect, so we can't exactly fill it out properly yet. This is the puzzle element of Picross, trying to figure out these squares by using hints scattered throughout the grid. Alright, that's pretty much all the gameplay elements there is for standard Picross, so now we can move on to the advanced stuff. The most common thing to look for first in any puzzle is the columns and rows with the biggest and most numbers. Like this column here, it's just a big single 8. If you were to use the drawing tool to see what the 8 would look like, it could look like this. Now try drawing the block in some other positions. What you start to notice is that no matter how you draw the 8, the 6 middle squares are always filled in, so you can fill them in for real. There's lots of examples like these in many different forms in every puzzle, even that 4-2-1 example earlier. If you try drawing that one out in different ways, you can see some squares which are also guaranteed to be filled as well. Instead of looking for squares to fill all the time, sometimes finding squares which can't be filled is more helpful. In rows or columns with a single number, a filled in square lets you know how far the block can reach because it has to include that square in it. If you take this column with a single 4, for example, no matter how you go about drawing the block, these squares are always out of reach, so you can cross these out. If you have a few squares filled in, a row or column with multiple numbers, you can start to get an idea of what squares belong to which blocks when you think about their reach. Like with this row of 3 and a 4 with these squares are so far apart that you can easily tell which squares belong to each block. Now that you know this, you can check each block's reach individually and see what squares can't be filled in and cross them out. Okay, hopefully you followed along so far and I haven't confused you too much. If you don't get all of it right now, that's alright. I'm gonna go through a simple 10x10 puzzle and try to explain each step I take in real time, so it'll hopefully make more sense from a natural perspective. Just gonna switch to the live recording any second now, so don't go anywhere. Alright, hopefully this is working properly and it doesn't mess up anywhere. I apologise if this comes off as less descriptive since it's live, but if I went into a lot of detail, we'd probably be here all day, so I'm just going to get straight into the puzzle. So what we see straight away along this top row is a 5 and a 3, so let's go about drawing those. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, space 1, 2, 3. And there's quite a lot of squares that are highlighted here. We can probably find something if we draw it in a different position and compare it. So I'm going to use this row to demonstrate. So 1, 2, 3, space 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, what do we see that's in common with this row and this row? Well, what we see is that no matter what, these squares will be filled in, regardless of the position of the blocks that we draw. And that's a great example of how the overlapping trick works, where you can find squares from two similarities in pattern. Next thing to look at would be this column, so 1, 2, space 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And what you know, there's actually no other way we can draw this combination, so we can actually just fill it all away. That easy. We have 1, space 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And once again, there's no other way we can draw it. So there we go. We have 1, space 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, space 1, 2. And there we go again. No other way we can draw it, we can fill them in without any worry at all. And what you know, it filled in this top row as well. Now, I wanna target your focus on these middle rows here. What we notice about these middle rows is that there's 2 numbers for each row, and there's a square on each end of the grid. So because of this, you can kind of get an idea for what the blocks would look like and how far they reach. So I'm just going to do this top one. We see this 1, well, it's a 1, it doesn't have any reach. And we see this could be a 2. And it can't reach any further than that. So we know that no matter what, these squares will always be empty. There's no way this could be filled in. I'm just going to do the rest because they all follow the same idea and it's just easier. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3. And likewise, in all of these squares, there's no way any of them can be filled, so we can actually go and cross them all out, because none of those blocks reach far enough. And we can actually also just fill them in, because the blocks start at the edge, we know where they start, we know how long they are, we know where they end. So we can just fill them in entirely. And look, we're nearly done. So next, I guess, would be these 2 columns. They both have a single 2 in, but we can see that the blocks are down here, so there's no way they can be up there. So we can cross those out, we can fill these in. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, can't reach any further, we can fill these in. We have 1, 2, can't reach there, can fill it in because it starts there. 1, 2, 1, 2, can't reach here, fill that in, and yeah. And that is a Picross puzzle done, with a nice little pigeon picture as a reward. So I want to thank you for watching. Hopefully this helps at least someone who watches this. If the worked example helped a lot, but you would like to see more examples like this, whether it be another 10x10, a 15x15, or a 20x20 puzzle, don't be afraid to let me know in the comments below. And thanks again, and until next time.